Thank you for joining us for a brief overview of execution certainty on megaprojects. If you're in megaprojects, you know the world and all the stats about the overall performance of them. And you've probably done plenty of deep dives on the root causes and all the complex elements that contribute to that. But nonetheless, in this complex environment, our clients are setting a new course and operating with drastically different results. And that's partly to do with our approach of execution certainty. They are operating with different levels of discernment, transparency, and confidence that they will be able to execute both to that schedule, to that budget, to those safety commitments, and everything else that comes along with that project. What I mean by discernment is, given the complexity of these projects, we always know that there's going to be 100 red items at any given time. But the real key is to be able to identify what are the handful that leadership has to collectively come together, address, constructively disrupt, that's going to put the overall trajectory on the project 3 or 4 years down the road on the right track, versus the other 95 that you can mitigate through traditional means. Your teams know how to deal with them, you can empower them, versus that handful that really must be disrupted. And with that handful, having the transparency between what's really sort of going on at the base level and the executives who have the most latitude at being able to think creatively about how we might go about addressing it, ensuring that it gets resolved where they can be resolved quickly with the maximum amount of run rate, and in a way that works for everybody for the life cycle of the project. All of this really leading to a new level of confidence. You know, rarely have I ever met an executive who gets confidence out of seeing everything's green. You know, you don't get confidence by people saying, hey, take my word for it, we're fine. You get confidence by being able to expose and really look at most complex issues that we're dealing with, and then knowing that we know what they are and that we have a viable path forward. And even if we don't have a path forward, we know we don't have a path forward, and we're working on it to ensure that everybody's on the same page with what it's going to take to resolve it successfully. And that builds a whole nother level of confidence that allows the various stakeholders throughout the organization to all contribute to the optimum of what it is they need to deal with to resolve those critical issues to stay on trajectory during the project. So what is execution certainty? Execution certainty is a complementary approach for managing large-scale, complex projects and initiatives, specifically mega projects. There's two main focuses in it. One is sort of the structure of the process, and then of course you can't ignore the people side of it as well, sort of the corresponding behaviors that the teams will have to walk through and exhibit in order to be successful on it. We start with the structure side. There's almost always a disconnect, even on the best run projects, between executive intent and what a project team needs to line up to with defined scope, clear mission, level 3 schedules, everything sort of concrete that they need to deliver on. And if you just kind of think about it, you know, is 9% rate of return good? Well, I don't know. It depends on what the market's doing. You know, the executive intent often is a bit more by its very nature sort of amorphous and directional. Whereas we all know if you want a project to be successful, just put a ring fence around the project team. Don't change anything. Yet, you know, when one of these projects have to continue to evolve over 5 years, it's almost impossible to know that something's not going to come in the environment and disrupt it. So we start addressing this disconnect through identifying what are the right waypoints for a project. Now, what's a waypoint? Well, if you're navigating over untraveled terrain, or if you're sailing out in the ocean, or you're flying in an airplane, places that doesn't have established route, a waypoint is the point along your travel in which you know you have to get to navigate on the journey. Knowing that because those things are in very sort of environmentally changing world, you're going to adjust your specifics on the day-to-day based on the environment you meet as part of it. So what does that have to do with a project? Well, similar to, you know, you always have to have a good level 3 schedule and everything planned out, but we all know that that schedule will not be the journey that we're on. So it creates a complementary view for must we be strategic as an overall project in order to put us on the trajectory and reliably fulfill on that executive intent as a complement to our existing schedule, in which we always have to reconcile how are we going to get there, but we also know that how is often going to change 2 or 3 times based on the current circumstances that we find out later. There's a lot more on waypoints that you can go on and take a look at all the videos in greater detail, but essentially identifying, and usually there's 8 to 12 a year for a typical mega project, what those are creates that roadmap that the whole team is able to line up to and help drive the discernment between one of those red items that we don't like it is moving to the right, but we can mitigate it, we can contain it, versus which one of those initially that starts to threaten, we must be there for that strategic purpose, and we have to constructively disrupt. It drives that level of discernment. It drives sort of a unifying aspect of a shared register for all of the different silos and organizations that have to contribute into something so complex as producing one of these projects. And it also helps illustrate the progress that's being made and support the acknowledgement and the sharing of successes, because people are focused on handling the complex challenges as they come up in order to ensure that level of confidence is established throughout the life of the project. So often our clients report having a different level of peace of mind and confidence. It's not that it's easy. The projects are always challenging, but at every step of the way, they know if I'm dealing this challenge right in front of me, the long term will take care of itself. This is what we have to focus on today to ensure we're set up for success, and doing that every step ensures getting to that success at the end. But of course, we are all known throughout the governance process and any one of these sort of structural things, putting the right systems in places doesn't mean anything if you don't have the right corresponding behaviors. And with our work on over 50 mega projects, it really sort of boils down to 2 things as key differentiators. One is coherence. And what do I mean by that? We often think about alignment and making sure everybody's on the same page. But when we look at something as complex as this, you have so many diverse elements. Sometimes they won't be in perfect alignment between 2 points. But as long as they're flowing in a certain harmony, if you think of an orchestra, or you think of a group of rowers all pulling at the same time, they might have to do things a little bit different. But as long as they're contributing in the same direction, you get a sort of in the flow state. And every project can be in that flow. And if you even think about it, some of the best projects of your career, looking back on it, it's not that you always agreed with everybody. Some of your best people that you loved working with, you disagreed with, but you found your way, and you were always in a certain coherence. Ensuring that gets established and maintained and pulling together has an exponential multiplier effect, as well as the inevitable aspect when you're dealing with producing an outcome so complex, it always requires people to sort of expand their ownership. You don't get put in charge or in any scope of a project without a track record of having delivered. But there's always the things that are outside. And we all know that. We see the challenges really break down at the interfaces of the silos. And no matter how much structures that we put in place in order to ensure those interfaces go smoothly, which is rightful to do, there's also the personal interface. And there's the leadership interface. And it requires a sort of corresponding broadening of what we as a horizontal leadership team is producing and how we're going to deal with that. That is to say, those complex issues require being addressed from multiple areas, whether they're in scope or out of scope. Identifying those waypoints and establishing them on a roadmap helps drive those conversations so the whole team can be successful together, as opposed to people just ensuring that their scope is successful, which we all know is a failed strategy as soon as you look up, because we know how the project is going to turn out in those cases. So that's the overview of execution certainty. Now, there's a lot of more nuances and details and what's the difference between a waypoint and a level 1 schedule. I invite you to go to executioncertainty.com. There'll be a lot more information and links, or just feel free to give us a call.